Santos, welcome.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
We met in TabConf, and it's really great to have you here again and see what's going on. We're doing that hackathon. So welcome to Bold Fun and Legends of Lightnings.
Thank you.
So tell us, Santos, a little bit about yourself so that we know and the audience knows why you joined us and what's the goal of our conversation for today. It'd be great to learn more.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. I'm Santos Fernandez. So I've been interested in Bitcoin, going down the rabbit hole back in 2014. I ended up working in financial services and technology for like a decade, a little bit over a decade. And then
right?
Yeah, Amex. I worked on the global data repository team, which housed all corporate data, did bank integrations, data quality, a bunch of data operations, bunch of different things. Then I found my way to Zebedee, where I started as the first product manager, became the business lead of tech and product, and then VP strategy, now VP business intelligence. So focusing on all things data.
So you have the best title of them all, huh? I love it. So share with us what you're going to talk about today, and if you want, you can start with the presentation anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, the goal of the presentation is to really illuminate Lightning UI/UX. So there's a bunch of different Lightning primitives or like building blocks. And now it's like, okay, you just thinking about starting your application or thinking about like how you integrate Lightning into your application to provide, a great experience to your user and make use of this great technology. So I'm going to show you today like the building blocks, the UIs, and then tell a story, the user experience with those UIs. And then I'll show you some real concrete examples of implemented Lightning experiences in real products today. All right, cool. So let's jump into it. So here, I covered this background. Couple other things I'd like to mention about myself is that I'm a shadowy supercoder, so I like to contribute to open source and open source all of my projects. I built a few products myself and a bunch of different, starter code examples. And then I lead communities here in Arizona, and I've organized some workshop days and conferences as well. So I'm also an educator and community leader.
With Emerald, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've open sourced Emeralize, and then I've also like put together a bunch of different starter code bases, educational videos, and then I run the Arizona Bitcoin Network. And I recently started I run the Arizona Bitcoin Network with like many other organizers. I co-organize it, and I also recently started BitDevs Phoenix. So
nice.
Kicking off dev education locally here in Phoenix, Arizona.
Nice.
Yep, so that's about me. So kind of going over this presentation, we talked about the goal. We have two major sections here. We have Lightning primitives, the building blocks, and then we have Lightning UI/UX. So let's go ahead and jump into this a little bit deeper. And I'm going to post the presentation link for anyone that is interested. I posted it in the chat so you can have access to that, and then the links too. So the assumptions is that you have some familiarity with the Lightning Network and that you're comfortable with product design. It's not required. You can actually learn this online, but just saying like this, that definitely helps with this presentation in particular. If you have some background in product or product design, or have implemented different code bases, but there's a course or a crash course that I put together that you can watch at any time at your own leisure on YouTube. So getting into this, like why does UI/UX matter in the first place? Well, if you want to maximize the number of Bitcoin users, you need to make it as easy and intuitive as possible and provide optionalities for all different skill levels. Users that have a bad experience with your product will uninstall or abandon your site, which delays hyper Bitcoinization. So it'll slow down your growth and it'll slow down Bitcoin's growth. So thinking about this a little bit further, these are some key things to know about your users. Who is your ideal customer, for example? Like, are you going after people that have maybe never engaged with Bitcoin before or experienced it? They might have heard about it before. Or are you going after like intermediate level Bitcoin users or advanced Bitcoin users? And that really determines like a lot of like how you will design your product. At Zebedee, we focused on users that have like no experience with Bitcoin, so we design our product accordingly. But if you were focused on, like, for example, mempool.space, you might you might be focused more on advanced Bitcoin users or intermediate level Bitcoin users, and you would design your products differently. So determining who your ideal customer is important. Understanding what is their familiarity with Bitcoin and Lightning, because then it determines like the language that you use in your product as well. What problems are they facing? And most importantly, like, how does Bitcoin Lightning help them with the problem that they're facing? And that really helps you narrow in to understand like which problems you should go after and which problems you should solve. Keeping in mind, Bitcoin Lightning really enables instant transactions or near instant, very cheap payment processing, and ultimately they're final. So thinking about those key three things and how does it help the problem that the user is facing, and positioning it that way is really important. Because if you're solving the wrong problem or your solution doesn't actually solve the problem, then you're going in the wrong direction. And that's a really important thing to focus on and make sure, because it's easy to do. You have this hammer and you want to go nail down everything, right? But really focusing where Lightning is most impactful really helps a lot in providing that like 100x UX improvement. Any questions so far?
I wanted to ask you, when you're thinking about, understanding who is your ideal customer, do you look at user personas or like tribes, or how do you try to think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. User personas are really helpful to define. Things that you can do to understand your user persona is, if you've launched your product as a proof of concept or even an MVP, get out there and start talking to your users. Like, talk to people on Twitter, reach out to them on bolt.fun, like engage your users and get their honest feedback. You can come up with like 3 to 5 questions that you can ask them. Make sure they're open-ended, so not yes or no questions, and begin understanding like who would actually use your product, and like what are their attributes, like what are their demographics, what is their experience level with Bitcoin, and like watch them. Like, don't guide them at all, watch them use your product. And there's so much you can learn from just doing that alone, like 3 to 5 user interviews. And then you can always form a hypothesis around like the user persona that you're targeting.
Can you explain what is user persona? Because I know what you mean, but maybe our audience doesn't.
Yeah, you can define like who is your user, like what are their age ranges, like provide a description of that particular customer, and like what do they do, where do they spend their time, how do they think, and you can kind of form a hypothesis around this. And when you form the initial hypothesis of who your user is, because you may not have users at this stage, you can form that, and then you can actually see when you go to market and you launch your product and you see people register, you can, collect emails and reach out to them and say, hey, I'll pay you some Bitcoin if I can spend some time with you and ask you some questions. And then you can evolve your user persona over time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So moving forward, my recommended tools for basically Lightning UI UX is using Notion. It's like kind of like a note editor, like a note-taking app. And it's very powerful and robust. So you can use this to manage your requirements. Basically, you can say like, these are the features that I want designed. These are what they're supposed to do. These are the points in the user experience. These are the user personas, and have this all in a living document that we refer to as a source of truth. So this is where you can kind of develop a checklist. This is the work of typically like product managers and product leaders that will create these. But given that you're working on your own hackathon, you or someone on your team should create this criteria as well as requirements, because otherwise you can enter a phase where you're designing, where you never have an end to your design or moving on to the next phase of development. You can also like really begin to understand the complexity involved with this. So that's why you would use Notion and what you would use it for. And I have an example document too that I can share in the chat later on. And then you can use Figma. Figma is my favorite design tool. There's lots of tutorials on YouTube that you can use to learn it. I learned it myself all online. And then, you can begin copying these open source designs that I'll give you as a part of this presentation and begin using it, modifying it to your own brand, your own product as well. And that's where you'll do it in, is Figma. Ultimately, you'll do your design work in Figma. Yep. All right, so Lightning primitives. So Lightning primitives are the Lightning Network building blocks of user interfaces and user experiences. And that's what UIUX stands for, user interfaces and user experiences. So let's go ahead and look at some pillars of Lightning primitives. You have invoices, both 11 invoices. You'll hear them referred to as that. At Zebedee, we call them charges. You'll also hear them called payment requests. But no, ultimately, it's a bolt 11 invoice, and we're talking about the same thing. Then we have LNURL, which is a payment orchestration protocol built on top of Lightning. And then lastly, we have Lightning addresses, which are a human-readable ID, basically, that you can send payments to for the Lightning Network. It looks like an email, but ultimately, it's for receiving payments.
Yeah, we have the ZBD one for Torogo's Dev, so that's really cool.
Absolutely. Very cool. And now kind of looking at, Lightning invoices or payment requests more abstractly before we look at them in user interfaces, let's understand what they are and what they're used for. So typically these Lightning invoices are only able to be paid once. So if a user tries to pay it twice, you'll actually need to provide 2 invoices. So there are some applications that blur the line on this, but from all the products that I've seen in Lightning, this is how it's implemented currently, and the current primary flow for Lightning invoices. You also, as the receiver, need to create the invoice for a specified amount. So I would create an invoice for a specific amount and send it to you, and then you would pay it. And you would have to pay it before the expiration expires, because you basically only set them for less than a day, typically like 5 minutes to 1 hour, so you don't bloat the Lightning Network with all of these different pending payment requests. So that's kind of how invoices work currently, as I've seen them in most products on the Lightning Network. And here's kind of like the user experience flow that you would see as a part of a Lightning Network invoice. It's really a great use case for purchases, and it's the most widely adopted standard, though it can cause friction, because if you are trying to provide like an experience, right, it's kind of synchronous, meaning that you have to create an invoice and send it to me, or your program or application needs to generate an invoice, and then the user needs to pay it before it actually expires. And if they try to pay it after it expires, then you kind of run into an error. So that's like a common pitfall that I've seen with invoices and that I've experienced myself over time. So let's take a look at this like a little bit more granularly. So we have Bob here, and then we have Alice. So Bob wants Alice to pay him. So Bob creates an invoice, and as a part of creating this invoice, specifies an amount, an expiration time, and a description of the invoice. So Bob will copy that invoice and then send it to Alice. So Alice will receive that invoice and then needs to scan it or pay it in their Lightning app. So they need to like copy it, paste it, then confirm and pay. And then after that point, Bob will have received Alice's tips or payments. So if you think about that from like a user experience standpoint, that's a lot of steps. One, the Lightning invoice kind of looks like a bunch of jumbled text to an end user if they've never seen one before. Then, Bob has to know what it is, copy this jumbled text and send it to Alice, which is a lot of manual steps, a lot of opportunities for dropping off, where the user just says, no, I'm not going to do this, and I'm just going to abandon the app. Then Alice has to then receive it, right, and copy it, go to the app, paste it, and then send it. That's a lot of steps for some end users. So it can be good if you have like a browser extension already or a mobile app already, but you need to have like onboarded the user and educated them on like how to experience this flow. And we've seen this with like a lot of early applications in Lightning, right? Like this is like what the most widely adopted standard, but you can see there's a lot of points of friction where the user can get an error, not know what to do, and then abandon your app. But once they do know and they do understand the experience, it's pretty seamless. But know when you're using this, you may be providing a more complex flow to someone that is not a Bitcoin Lightning user, and they may abandon your app. So then getting into LNURL. So this attempts to address that kind of pain point of invoices expiring. you're only able to pay for like a specified amount in most applications. Some applications will let you pay over it, but the majority don't. You can have a LNURL pay request. So this is like a static invoice is the way you can think of it. The user can have, or the app can have the static QR code that the user can pay any number of times. You can even control how many times the user can specify it. They can pay it for any amount. The user can even specify a comment. So really it makes the payment experience significantly easier. You can use it for e-commerce, but the downside with this is that there's not as many applications currently utilizing LNURL. So it's a pretty widely adopted standard at this point. Like,
why not?
Pretty much, I think they have not like migrated to it yet, and there's not as much products out there being built with LNURL just yet. It's beginning to take off, and we see it a lot more in applications. But just know that it's not as widely adopted as Bolt 11 Invoice, since it's the base standard.
One of the things that I've noticed in some of the apps, and even the most experienced people have done it recently, is where you pay on chain instead of with Lightning, and you don't even know that you're doing that until it's too late, and it takes longer, and there's problems. Like, are there different ways to present in the app or in the screen? This is a Lightning invoice. You should use your Lightning something. Or is there things that would be smarter for the person to know what they're doing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think at that point, what would be best is designing two user interfaces. We already have kind of like one example where we can look at applications that support both on-chain and Lightning, to your point, and we can screenshot each part of the flow. So each UI that you see, each step that happens, you can take a screenshot and lay it all out, like telling a story from left to right, each screen, each interaction that you have. And then you can look at new ways, maybe adding a tabbed interface or asking the user to select an option. Do you want to do Bitcoin or do you want to do Lightning? You could have some information like a tooltip to describe the differences between the two to make that a little bit easier for the user to understand. And it adds like a couple extra steps, but you could show it only as a part of an onboarding experience and ask the user if they need a reminder. So that's one way you could approach it as it relates to Bitcoin and Lightning, kind of like both functionalities that coexist in the app. But yeah, for LNURL, and thank you for the question. For LNURL, it's a very popular standard. Nearly every application supports LNURL and Lightning address. As of right now, I just haven't seen LNURL pay in particular used as much. And I think maybe folks are just not aware of like the ways that you can use it. That makes an improvement to Bolt 11 invoices, as well as the other use cases out there for it. So I think we'll continue to see an increased adoption in Lightning Network user experiences designed with these things, because they offer some really powerful advantages. And now we have nearly every wallet that has adopted this standard. So I think that kind of like opens up new experiences, especially for the builders here, to innovate and to use that LNURL pay to provide an advantage in user experience compared to older Lightning Network applications currently making use of Bolt 11. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then we have withdrawal requests too. So typically this is where, if I wanted to take money from app A and move it to app B, I'd have to go to app B, create an invoice, copy it, go to app A, and then pay it in order for the funds to be transferred. With withdrawal requests, you can just create a QR code or put it in a button, and then you just have to click a button to withdraw it. It'll open, you can copy it, or it'll open your other Lightning Network application up, and you can click confirm, or sometimes it'll automatically just process and receive the funds of the withdrawal. So that makes it much easier for a user to transfer funds between Lightning Network applications rather than using an invoice flow. So this is another big improvement for payment orchestration or simplifying the user experience with LNURL. And then you can look at, so we call it static charges, like the static invoice QR code or LNURL pay. They all mean the same thing. So let's say Alice wants to tip a creator that she really loves. So basically Alice could use a browser extension like ZBD, or pull out the mobile app and then scan a QR code and pay it, and then leave a comment. It makes it much simpler. As you can see, there's like significantly less flows or steps required to paying out the LN Euro pay. And then it puts the power back in the user's hand rather than requiring the receiver or the application to generate this. So this is one great way of making use of LN Euro Pay. Is tips, keep providing a QR code for all of your users. And that's something like you get out the box at ZBD as well. And then withdrawal requests are also very simple. So let's say like Jane wants to deposit sats into her wallet from the Zebedee platform. So the platform will generate a QR code. Alice scans that and confirms the withdrawal, and then Jane receives the funds in her app. So it's really that simple.
So what if you're like a coffee shop or a store that's selling items, and you have several like machines that you are trying to pay to one main store, right? But you don't want everybody to have like the information of what's in your wallet. How do you keep the privacy? Like, how does that setup like show up in some of these UX UIs? Is that something that you can explain?
Yeah, I can. I have some examples towards the end of my presentation of case studies there. But I think, providing an LN Euro Pay is providing ultimately an invoice at the end of the day. It's just an HTTP URL. Perfect. So really, like there's not really like a privacy disadvantage, I would say, especially if you're a store operating in public where you have like a legal entity or something along those lines. So I think for commerce, not too concerning for privacy. And then the last one that we have is the Lightning address. So I really love this. This makes, in my opinion, as well as what I've seen with data, a significant improvement in the user experience, because now you're no longer interacting with only QR codes or a bunch of gibberish from the user's perspective. You only really know what an invoice is if you're like a developer, power user of Bitcoin. If I sent you this jumbled text, or I sent it to my, like, for example, my aunt or something like that, she would have no idea what I sent her and probably think my cat walked on my keyboard or something like that, Whereas this is like a human readable ID. It looks just like an email, so it's a lot more intuitive to understand and requires less education.
Got it.
So that's one advantage, is it doesn't require a QR code, though you could show it as a QR code. All this is like another abstraction of the LN Euro Pay, putting it behind a human readable identifier. You can do easy deposit and withdrawal, since you can just like text money to Santos at wavelake.com, for example, if they have Lightning addresses, or I can send it to, Santos at fountain.fm, for example. I can send payments much more easily, and I can do withdrawals as well, where I could set a Lightning address once and click a withdrawal button, and now the application can move it. You can also do really cool, interesting things like payment splitting. So you can do like collaboration, automatic royalties. You can do automatic splits to multiple users, one or more. So
is that the Prism concept?
No, this would, I think this would be slightly different. But this there's a few different applications that have implemented payment splitting. For example, you have like Fountain, where when you boost, it'll automatically do a payment to like using KeySend to different pub keys. So if you have multiple podcasters that are all part of this episode, and you boost it as a user, extend a tip, then it'll automatically split between those creators. And this is like, in my opinion, a little bit easier way of interacting with it, because when you're interacting with the pub key, it's still just, numbers and text. So for an end user that doesn't know about Bitcoin or Lightning, or that's not a power user, this offers a little bit more human simplicity. Yes. Like it's a little bit more intuitive to like the end user that may not be, 99% of users are not going to be technical or understand what that means. And then like this is what basically the Lightning address flow. So you can see like step one, Alice wants to send a payment to their friend using a Lightning address. So here, for example, I'm sending a payment to Andre. I'm sending 1,000 sats. I put in the amount, the Lightning address, and then I review and confirm the payment, and then it's sent. So you can like set it and forget it. You can easily process payments. It's like makes it such that it's like an open network Zelle, if you will, or a Cash
Yeah.
App, for example. It's no longer a siloed or limited, just a Lightning address. You specify one or more. You could add friends with your friends' Lightning addresses and make payments over an open network. So
you now just need to add blonde hair to Andre.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay,
Nice.
cool. And
Okay.
then here's kind of like the payouts or the automatic splits that I showcased. And I do have open source repositories where you can see how this is like implemented from like a technical standpoint. Since most of this is technical, the UI UX piece is pretty simple. It's just like
Is this
put
in
in the
CBD
Lightning
or
addresses.
somewhere else? Where do you have the
This
repositories?
This is on my GitHub, so it's on
Okay.
github.com/Santoshi. I posted it in the
Santoshi.
comments.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah,
It's
you can
not
kind of
posting, so I'll try to type them later.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know
Don't worry.
what's up with that. But
it's Santoshi in GitHub.
Yes, it's like Zantoshi.
Zan. I can't even post either. I'm spelling it wrong. Tell me again.
Here, I'll send it to you real quick over Telegram. One second.
You keep going while I do that.
Okay. Yeah, so this is kind of like how it works, and I'll showcase like an example of this, like how it's implemented. I implemented this on the Emeralize code base, and I have that open source as well. And that's under NBD. And I have examples of other like automatic payouts or payouts where you could enter one or more Lightning addresses, and then it will fire payments automatically to those Lightning addresses, or splitting them. So you pay an invoice, and then it'll split between like all of the Lightning addresses that you listed, just to showcase like exactly how that works from a technical standpoint. And then you can also see it from like a UI standpoint.
Awesome.
And then we at Zebedee also have support for like PubKey as well via API, and it works pretty much identically. So we covered like primitives of Lightning apps and some examples of it. So let's tell a story with the primitives, and that's where we get into more of like the UI UX. So we can create like user experiences with Lightning composed of the Lightning primitives. I'm going to be using Bootstrap here, and I use this in the UI design because it's pretty easy to like get started for developers. And it's a like very widely known code base that was originally developed by folks at like Twitter. And I have a YouTube tutorial here that you could also use to learn Bootstrap if you're a developer. So if you're a designer, it's easy to like, there's already a bunch of UI kits that you can use to get started with Bootstrap. And I have a file ready to go in this presentation. So you can design it, and then you make it easier for your developers to actually implement it during a hackathon. Because keep in mind, hackathons, you're really time poor. You only have 48 hours or 2 weeks, right? Or 2 months, depending upon the size of the hackathon and like the competition that you have. So you want to build something where you're not reinventing the wheel. And Bootstrap's a great example of that. Tailwind CSS is a great example of that. It just depends on what your developer is comfortable with. And I decided to work with Bootstrap since I think it's very easy for new developers to get started with, as well as like power developers. So if you're more focused on a back end, build a pretty nice responsive front end that supports mobile and desktop out the box. And then here's like an example of like a simple user experience flow that can be like really like widely changed to suit your brand. So it's kind of like a boilerplate. And these are kind of like key aspects of this. And I have a ton of examples that I'll be able to share with you that I designed. And I've made them very simple so you can pick them up. You can change the fonts, you can change the colors, you can change the nav bar, add your own brand, and modify it slightly to be suitable for your product. And you can get moving faster. So first, you kind of start out with this Lightning address payout. So you add an input field for your Lightning address. You can input the amount in Satoshis, for example, and then the comment. And all you do is submit. And there's really two things that can happen. The payment can be successful. And then you can have the user check their wallet to see if they received it. Or there can be an error. And this is typically what it will look like if you get an error as a part of a Lightning application. So I added a generic sort of error because when you're making a payment request, depending upon the service that you use, so for example, at ZBD, we have a Lightning API platform that you can use to integrate payments. This is the error, like this is where in the response, or this is like the property in the response that would give you the error message to render it to the user. So it's kind of like a tip to your developer to use this property in the response to show the user what went wrong, because there's a few things that can go wrong, right? For example, the payment could fail for many different reasons. So you need to be able to handle both the success case and the error case. Very important to handle the error case very well, because otherwise your users won't understand what went wrong. And if they think your payment failed for whatever reason, especially if it's a withdrawal, they might think your product is a scam, and you don't want that, right? You have one chance with the user to provide them a great experience before they leave. So it's important to handle both, to test this a bunch of times once you've implemented it. But starting with design and thinking about where it can go wrong is a great starting point, because I guarantee it's a lot easier for you to edit this design than it is to edit all of your code when you've already built this experience. So that's another great advantage of UI UX and designing early. And it creates more space for people, right? Instead of just engineers on a team, you have designers that can help save you time, make sure you're solving the problems well, and then could create presentations, so on and so forth, because every advantage you can get in the Bolt.fun hackathon, you want to take it. Whatever can
Like
save you
testing your
time.
hypotheses, right? Also, it helps you make sure that it's not failing.
Exactly. And you can do prototypes in Figma. You can like show it as if it was a real app before you write any code. So you can test your hypotheses and make sure it works before you spend time writing code. It's very important. That's a great point.
Right.
Okay, awesome. So here are like the designs. So I'm going to share I got to change my screen really quick.
Okay.
So I can jump into Figma and showcase this. All right, can you see my screen?
I'm gonna put it on.
All right, thank you.
I'll tell you when it's ready. There we go. I
Perfect.
can see your screen.
So here's Figma. You can see pretty much like I can interact with these designs. So this is the design I just showed you as a part of the slide deck. You can copy it. You can edit the copy. You could change the color if you wanted to. So for example, I wanted to go black. I could go black, and then I could change the text color to white. So you could really modify this to be, you could basically fork this and change it to be your designs like I was talking about earlier. And you can do it, using pretty much anything that you want. And then if you want to construct your own user experiences, I did the work and went out and found you all the sort of components as a part of Bootstrap. So then you can translate this exactly to the engineering specifications for your engineers and make it really easy for them to replicate your design in code. And you can even change it to different color schemes. So if it's all the way at the bottom here for the extra components, these are just kind of like boilerplates to get you started.
Where do we find this again? Where is it saved?
This is in the presentation deck, and then I can send the link out too.
Oh, nice. Okay, thank you.
Sure. So like we can undo all the changes that we did. That way they're not permanent. And then I just sent you on Telegram the link to this file in particular. And then you can see like I use these card components. You can see a paywall with LN Pay. So basically here you have the nav bar, you have some header text, and you have some cards. And the cards have like a title, a description, and a price. And you can denominate this however you want. You could do it in Bitcoin, you could do it in bits, you can do it in sats, whatever makes sense for your product. So this, we can like even create a prototype, and I'll show you what this looks like. So you can click buy, and then here we'll navigate the user to this screen. We could click open wallet, and then we would show like the browser extension, like handling a payment, for example. And then from opening the wallet, the user will click pay. And then once they've clicked pay, they're now able to access this blog content. So it makes it like very tangible. You can add to it, add error messages, add success messages when the user receives a payment, and go from there. So this is like what it would look like. And you can see here like what the example of the prototype might look like. So you could actually take these designs and showcase them to real users. I clicked buy, it took me to this screen. I'm going to open the wallet and then pay it. And then from there, after the invoice has been paid, I'm allowing them to see the blog content, for example.
Got it.
So you could watch the users and like design products before you even start building them and get some really good feedback. So here's like a deposit, for example. Like this could be used for like a wallet flow, and we'll showcase some real products actually using this. So they make a deposit. Once the application gets back that a payment has been made, you can show them, oh, great, like you've received a payment. And then from there, you could, after like a few seconds, navigate them to like their next UI. So from there, let's go ahead and walk through this flow. So you click deposit, say like the next thing you made the payment. From there, it's going to direct them back to their wallet balance, and you can see the wallet balance increased for the amount that you made the payment. And there's a couple things like abstracted away, but it gets the kind of point across. You can showcase it for both 11 invoices, which are nearly identical, but they expire. You could show some examples of what it might look like for an LN URL withdrawal. So you can see the user starts off with 1337 sats. They click withdrawal. They're shown this QR code. They could open it if they have a browser extension, or they could scan it with their mobile app, their mobile Lightning app. And then from there, after the withdrawal has been completed, you could show the user a success screen and update their balance to 0, for example, or subtract the amount they withdrew. Here's some examples of like paying an invoice or what we call a charge at Zebedee. So you could paste the charge in. You can show like an example for the user to confirm like the amount, the expires that. You could show a description. If we weren't able to read the charge, you could show an error message, for example. We'll say it's successful again, and then you show basically the charge was successful and it's been paid. Otherwise, show an error back on this screen. If, for example, for some reason the charge couldn't be paid or the invoice couldn't be paid.
Got it.
And this is pretty much majority of the flows that are currently available. I welcome anyone to use these materials and also to improve upon them as well, because there's a lot of improvements that we could make. Any questions about this stuff before I move on?
No, we're good.
All right, great. So let me go ahead and switch back to my presentation. All right. So we looked at like user experiences. We looked at how the primitives were used. So we looked at charges. We looked at LN URL pays. We looked at Lightning addresses, and we looked at paywall examples as well. Let's look at some real world applications now and see how they've been implemented. So we'll check out these case studies.
Okay.
So here's an example of like payments in a game that Zebedee is integrated into. You can see here like there's Bitcoin that's been added as a part of the level design in the game. They earn 6 sats. They're shown in animation. And then, for example, you enter the Zebedee gamer tag and you click redeem. So this is one way we've made it really easy for users to like withdraw their funds. It already gets sent to a Lightning address flow. And this is used for like absolute beginners because you want a very controlled and simple experience, as simple as possible. So what we found was using the gamer tag was the simplest way for games in particular. And you can see like when they clicked redeem that they received a notification and they received like some success UI here. So that's what that looks like. Let's look at an example of more like Lightning oriented. So you can see, for example, this is Fountain, where a like equals Bitcoin, and then you have programmatic money for payment splitting, revenue share, and automations, like I was talking about earlier. So you can see, like, as you like things, you sent 10 sats to this creator on the opposite end. So that's like a really cool functionality, and it can be fractions of a cent. So that provides like that unique advantage that you wouldn't be able to do with, legacy financial systems. Like sending less than $1 in legacy financial systems is really challenging because of the base fee. You're going to pay like 30 cents plus like approximately like a 3% payment processing fee. So like 33 cents per $1 transaction. It's not really economically feasible because of the base fee. So
yeah, I think I liked it because as a creator, you can also see who liked what in your clips. And so then when you want to post some content and maybe do a shorter clip, you'd be like, okay, this was the part that was liked the most or boosted the most. And then as a creator, you can repost what your audience liked the most, no?
That's a brilliant idea. That's a great example of gamification using Lightning and
Yeah.
real money payments. It's like you create a brand new leaderboard, a brand new metric as a part of social experiences to gamify your app and also to like showcase who your top users are. Like users love that kind of stuff. I think that's brilliant.
Now I have a game where my Bitcoin expires, and that I don't like. I was like, wait a minute, what? Because it was perfect until they now have this like in 2 days your sats expire. I guess it's a way to keep people on, right?
Definitely. And they need to implement automatic withdrawals. So like here's an example of
That's a good
like
point.
implementing or basically a payment flow using a Lightning address. So I'll put in like 100 sats, for example. I'll preview the withdrawal, and then I just slide the payment, and then the withdrawal is completed. So
Oh,
that's how
nice.
simple withdrawals can be. And you could set that and forget it, for example. If your
Mm-hmm.
application, the Zebedee app doesn't do this, but what you could do is as an application, like I built this into Emeraldize, for example, you have the user set their Lightning address once, and every time they receive above 100 sats in their balance, it's automatically sent to the Lightning address. So I
Oh,
don't need to
nice.
worry about it. The user doesn't need to worry about it. They set it and forget it from there. And then in this app, you can also cash out for like gift cards, for example.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
So the same is true for like rewarded browsing. So here's like an example in ad tech where it's if you know Brave browser, they give you like a token, which we all know why tokens are not useful and bad.
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't
this
touch them.
this browser exactly. This app, for example, will allow you to earn Bitcoin uh, browsing with this browser extension enabled and seeing some ads.
Got
So it's
it.
like a better version of Brave, in my opinion.
Wait, which app is this?
This is Slice.
Slice. Got it.
Yep.
Hmm.
From there, like here's an example of like a purchase flow using invoices. This is the one that I implemented. So from there, like you're shown an invoice, you can open it up in a wallet. You could scan it with your phone too. So you submit the
Mm-hmm.
payment, and on the opposite end, my application received the notification that it was paid, and now I'm granted access to browse this course. Here's an example. This is like one example of how you can do payments using invoices. Many applications are following this flow that I'll show with Wavelake, where you could like fund your wallet. So, for example,
Uh-huh.
Stacker News uses this, Wavelake uses this. You can then make a payment to deposit funds using a Bolt 11 invoice. You could do this with an LN URL Pay as well, so then it never expires. And you can
Mm-hmm.
associate it specifically which user is using it. So once the payment's made, now you have a balance within the app. So
Mm-hmm.
you deposit funds instead of paying invoices for
Got
every
it.
transaction. So that's the key difference between what I showed with Emeraldize and then this application. So you can see the payment was successful. I now have 113 sats after I deposited 100. And now, like on the back end, the application is handling all the payments from their own internal ledger, I assume. And then,
So
like for example,
it's like you have micro wallets within apps, basically.
exactly. And that's kind of the paradigm that we're seeing. And then I'm listening to my friend Chidori's song here. And then now all I have to do is I deposit sats once, and now I have money in my micro wallet that I can send payments to in Wavelake itself. So I don't have to keep topping up. It's a part of the experience.
Okay.
Fountain does the same user experience flow. It really just depends on like what your application goals are and like what you want to lean on to select
Mm-hmm.
which flow. So yeah, that's Wavelake and how they've implemented it. So there's two examples of how you can like kind of implement payments and transactions. And that kind of wraps up my case study. Any other questions on like the Lightning primitives or UI/UX or case studies that I might have shown before I move to close this part out?
Well, I have a question on like the future of payments. Is there anything exciting out there that you're looking at and you wish it was implemented yesterday?
That's a great question. I think moving more towards Lightning addresses um,
Mm-hmm.
for nearly like everything is probably the future of payments where we're headed. For example, you could create a static charge or LNURL pay and have it represented as a Lightning address. You could have it clickable as a button. You can generate them for users. It's interoperable with your Nostr ID as well. You're basically, and then it all converges on like one identity at that point for the internet, for like receiving, direct being identified on Nostr, receiving payments, could be your email. There's all kinds of different ways that this can kind of converge. So I think that's kind of where like the future is headed, is like one convergent like identity that is available on the internet, and you can have multiple, and you really can kind of choose like how you represent yourself in the internet. And then with Nostr, it also enables, badges to be issued for reputation and status. You can find all of someone's posts. You can send it to multiple relays. And then now, like, you can have the same ID for Lightning address payments as well. So I think that's kind of where we head.
And what about this Bolt 12? Like, is that, I've been hearing a lot about it, but it seems that there's controversy.
I haven't really seen any many like Lightning products implemented and released with Bolt 12 support. So I can't really comment on it at this stage. I'm more focused on like products that have been implemented that, are seeing growth and traction. I think it would be really cool to see Bolt 12, and I look forward to seeing them in products, how they use. I'll definitely study them. I'll definitely take a look and see what advantages and disadvantages they might have.
Nice. We'll close it out. I do have a question, but it's after.
Okay, sounds good. So I like to read this quote to like everyone that participates in the hackathon, because I truly believe this about hackathon participants. I've been in many, helped organize, mentored and judged hackathons. And I truly believe, like, out of all my interactions with the different people, including like the teams I've been a part of, is that, this quote holds true by my favorite author, R. Buckminster Fuller. Let me read it. Never forget that you are one of a kind. Never forget, if there weren't any need for you and all of your uniqueness on this earth, you wouldn't be here in the first place. And never forget, no matter how overwhelming life's challenges and problems seem to be, that one person can make a difference in the world. And in fact, it is always because of one person that all the changes that matter in the world come about. So be that one person. That's my call to action for you and all of the hackathon participants. And build the future now. Let's build the future now, and that's what we're doing here. So yeah, I'm really honored to be a part and to have presented here in front of all these awesome builders.
I love that quote. I often I mentor for pitches usually, and one of the questions that I tell the builders is, why you, meaning why are you special, what's your secret sauce, and why now? Like, why does this product have to exist now for audiences? And so if you can kind of explain that in your hackathon and explain that in your pitch, it really helps the team move along the way. And so I wanted to, in that line of questioning, I wanted to ask you, I heard you speak about impact effort matrix and thinking about user interviews and testing your hypothesis. Could you go into that so that we can close with how you think about building and why you, like, when you're building, how do you build? That would be the question.
That's a great question. I like to start off like building for hackathons where I'll ideate. So I'll set a timer for like some amount of time. It's very short, like 10 minutes maximum. And I will go through and I will just write down every idea that I can possibly think of, good or bad, insane or not insane, and I'll just keep going and going and going and going and going for the entire duration of time. But then you end up with a lot of ideas, right? So you can then grade the ideas based on a rubric. So you can look at it. A traditional one that is used is impact versus effort required. So the impact is like how much value that it generates for end users or for your product, like a business impact or user impact. Then you can rate it 1 through 5, 1 being like the least effort, or the least impactful, and then 5, the most impactful. Once you've done that, you can grade it based on the level of effort required to build said feature or said product, and you can rate it 1 through 5. So what you end up doing, and then you can also do the same thing for like feasibility, but I would say like if it's not feasible, you just mark it as like 0 effort because you can't actually execute it. So you do that typically as like a team exercise and make sure like everybody's aligned on like how you're calculating like the impact, and make sure your team believes it as well. So once you have like the 1 through 5 established, you can sort it. So you go from like highest impact. So you go 5 through 1. So you sort it in descending order. And then you do then after that, you do the least effort 1 through 5. Because if you have the highest impact, the least effort features identified or ideas identified, then you know what your lowest hanging fruit are. And you can begin thinking about which ones that you will begin executing on, and you always will execute it that way. So then you can build and ship each idea or each feature accordingly. You'll maximize how much you can get done in the hackathon as well this way. And you could even take it one step further to sort it out into like your must-haves for your product, your should-haves for the product, and then your could-haves for the product. So then you can really narrow in like what it is that you're going to build, what sequence, and really ship the most that you can and the most impactful product that you possibly can.
That is a great way to end this. Throw all the Post-its out into your mirror, then organize and put it together based on the impact effort metrics. Thank you, Santos, so much for joining us and for going through all of this with us so that the builders that are actually attending El Salvador conference pretty soon are going to be able to hear your talk and take advantage of these lessons and opportunities about how to build invoices and how to create an app that is really streamlined and very impactful and helpful and easy to onboard users. So thank you so much for having the time to come with us. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Hackathons and builders are very, close to my heart. And I think what everyone is building as a part of the Bolt.Fun hackathon is truly amazing and world-changing. We saw the outcomes from the last hackathon. It was truly mind-blowing. So it's an absolute pleasure and honor to have presented today in front of so many amazing builders. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Santos. Take care, and we really look forward to having you next time.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, everyone.